Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Scott Adams, the creator of the long-running, though seldom funny Dilbert comic strip, recently nutted up on camera because he saw a poll in which 53% of black respondents had said that it's okay to be white. So what was there to be unhappy about? Well, apparently Scott Adams was furious about the other 47%. Why couldn't it be 100? Now, this poll that he was so exercised over was conducted by Rasmussen, which means it might as well have been conducted by 3 lobotomized billy goats. And speaking of lobotomized, Scott Adams, who has been an inveterate racist for decades, and anyone with half a brain could tell it, he figured that this poll would provide him with cover to finally say some of the anti-black stuff that he's been wanting to say exactly the way that he's been wanting to say it. He said that as a result of this poll, half of black America hates white people, and that means black people are a hate group. That's what he actually said. Never mind the fact that It's Okay to Be White started as a white supremacist alt-right meme, which he had to have known, as did Rasmussen. Adams then continued his garbage take by saying that white people need to get the hell away from black people, that black people need to focus on education, and he's tired of seeing video after video of black Americans beating up non-black citizens. Apparently, he hasn't been paying attention to the news at all for the last 6 or 7 years. Basically, he took all the anti-black bile that he's been poorly concealing for the last 3 decades, and he just came right out and said it. And now he's been dropped by most newspapers and even his own publishing syndicate. Now, it's unclear whether or not Scott Adams was unaware or not, but while he had his head up Tucker Carlson's behind, American neighborhoods and communities are totally segregated based on race right now. Most of white America doesn't live anywhere near black people. Now, unless Adams is advocating for white people to leave the planet Earth and go to the moon, I would love to see him volunteer first. There is no further that white people as a group can move to get away from black people in America. Scott Adams is so racist that in the 30 years he's been drawing his comic strip, he hasn't even had black people in it. And that's been for decades now. It seems to me that he's been hating black people long before this poll came out last week. But for me, the topper had to be when he said that white people shouldn't do anything for black people anymore. What the world is he talking about? First of all, what has Scott Adams done for anyone other than Scott Adams? And what has he ever done for black people? He won't even have black people in his comic strip. So where's all this help that we're supposed to be getting from the likes of the Scott Adams of the world, right? This is the white savior delusion at work. When you convince yourself that you're God's gift, you tell yourself the world would stop spinning on its axis without you and that black people can't do without you, when the reality is if Scott Adams and these other racists went away, black people could progress and prosper. We are systematically kept in a state of constant economic starvation. We don't have control over the places that we live because white power controls them. Black people could very easily exert control over where we live, but that takes power, and we live in a country where black power is under siege and prohibited. White power has concentrated the entire economy and the institutions of the nation under its sole control. Nothing happens that they don't allow. So during his on-camera meltdown, Adams proves that he's an idiot by advocating for a racial segregation policy that already exists and for calling for an end to helping black people when we've never gotten help to begin with. You know, the more I think about it, Scott Adams' racist rant sounds less like a complaint and more like some twisted Freudian confession. But of course, this isn't about where white people live relative to black people, nor is it about helping black people. This is about a racist punk who has been allowed to make a very good living for himself trading in anti-black racism for a long time. And now he feels that he can openly say racist things because he's been allowed to get away with the low-key stuff for so long. But it seems he went a step too far this time, and now he's getting thumbs down from all of these newspapers, many of whom have been cutting him for years anyway. In fact, both the San Francisco Chronicle and the Cleveland Times-Union had both stopped carrying the Dilbert comic strip a while back, and one former newspaper managing editor went so far as to say that after they canceled the Dilbert comic strip in their paper, very few readers noticed when we killed it, and we only had a handful of complaints. And by the way, just for the record, The reason that Scott Adams got canceled by the San Francisco Chronicle and a number of other papers was because he had done comic strips that joked about reparations for slavery, among other things. This guy is a stomped down, dyed-in-the-wool racist, and he's been one for a hell of a long time. Scott Adams, like a number of right-wing nuts, loves to talk about the beauty of the free market, even though the reality is he's been largely shielded from it. And now that his own publishing syndicate has dropped him, and he has been, as he put it, zeroed out globally, I hope he'll still sing the praises of that same free market. Scott Adams is a racist, and like all racists, he's also a coward. Now you know why I don't watch much white media television, even their so-called entertainment, because I know who makes the crap they put on the air, and when it comes to print publication, I don't consume much of that either. Now that Scott Adams suddenly finds himself with a whole bunch of free time on his hands, he's decided to devote that time to trying to reinvent himself, mostly as some sort of victim, but for what I don't know. This racist creep has made millions of dollars, but he talks as if black people are holding him down somehow. He's gotten away with his racist garbage for decades, but now all of a sudden he's pulling white supremacy's favorite trick and pretending to be the victim. And by the way, that poll that Scott Adams used as his excuse to attack black people, that was a Rasmussen poll, and Rasmussen, for those of you who don't know, is basically the Fox News of polling. In fact, that's pretty much the only poll that Fox News or people like Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson mention on their shows. None of the other networks mention Rasmussen at all, probably because they're so pitifully inaccurate. Their job is to provide the white right with polls that say what the white right wants them to. Since most polls do not reflect at all what the white right consensus is, they decided to invent one that would. Rasmussen's job is to provide the white right with talking points. The white right is always trying to find a way to claim that their anti-black racism is somehow objective, or otherwise not just their evil obsession with hating black people, that they're not just pulling stuff out of their behinds. So this is where we get these copy and pasted crime stats and nonsense like the Rasmussen polls. Donald Trump was crowing about how Rasmussen had him ahead of Obama at the same time in his presidency, and as late as September of 2020, Rasmussen was still claiming that Trump was going to win re-election. I think we all know how that one turned out. So Rasmussen is comfort food for people who desperately wish that every other poll in existence would conform to their biases. Who knows, maybe Rasmussen will be nice and conduct a poll about how many people are still going to read Scott Adams' scribblings after this week. But not to be outdone, galloping in on his brain-dead pony comes Elon Musk to Scott Adams' rescue, though not to hire him and not to do anything for him. This reject from apartheid South Africa was trying to see if he could get any rage clicks by claiming that the white media is racist against, get this, whites and Asians. Of course, like all liars, he leaves out all the facts. Elon Musk seems to conveniently forget who it is who owns and runs these white media corporations. He must have also taken a crane hook to the temple, because he's also forgotten that he himself owns the largest social media platform on the planet. But like Scott Adams, Elon Musk is just another phony victim. That's how white power perpetuates itself. It tries to maintain its advantage by claiming it doesn't have one. And then if you disagree with them, they use the power they claim not to have to attack you. Scott Adams, at long last, has predictably made himself radioactive. It was only a matter of time before he screwed himself into oblivion. When you spend all day online trying to be a hero to white supremacist trash, this is the inevitable result. White supremacists can't control themselves. They can't control their actions or their mouths. They have to be violent. They have to be hostile and start fights. They have to go looking for something, anything they can pretend to be angry about. Because in a society that doesn't punish white supremacist excesses, they know they can act on their anger whenever they choose, so to them, they're just indulging their power. But every once in a while, their mouths get them in a fix they can't get out of. So, where will Scott Adams flee to now? He can go post his crap on Parler or some other white supremacist sewer, not that anyone's going to see it. Though my money is on him washing up in that toilet bowl that Ben Shapiro calls his website. Well, at least now Scott Adams and Gina Carano can go engage in a joint chorus of complaint about being canceled by the woke mob. Both of them are both completely unemployable at this point. And the white supremacist trash who claim that they're going to follow Adams wherever he goes, well, as I already told you about Gina Carano, whenever these racists finally destroy their careers, Their troll army doesn't follow them anywhere. The racists want to be where black people are at, because without us, they don't exist. They need to do things to attack us just so we will acknowledge their existence. The truth is that underneath all the white supremacists bragging and self-congratulating, they are parasites, leeches, bloodsuckers, vampires, and they know it. And what does a vampire see when it looks in the mirror? Nothing. So they need people who are substantive to validate that they exist. These white supremacists are miserable with only one another. They have to get us to acknowledge them just so that they have something to feed off of. Well, Scott Adams got people to notice him. For the first time in years. He messed around and he found out. And by the way, Adams also did a bizarre rambling rant the next day after he found out he had destroyed his entire life, and he tried to claim that he had, get this, planned all this out. That apparently this is some sort of, as he put it, third act. That's his way of defending having turned his entire career into a dumpster fire. That he meant to do this. That this is some sort of four-dimensional chess move. That's not a joke, by the way. He actually was implying that. Keep in mind, normally this oh-so-influential comic book scribbler gets 20,000 views for his videos, at least the live-streamed ones. The regular videos he posts get between 3,000 and 5,000 views. He's had a very big bump for the last few days, but anybody want to lay odds on how long that's going to last? Like most empty-headed narcissists, Scott Adams has told himself that he's actually going to retain all those viewers, even though most of them aren't subscribed to his channel, and most of them only showed up so that they could trash him in his own comment section. But he thinks that he's some sort of genius, and that the people who only come to his channel to attack him are going to stick around anyway because he's so charismatic and insightful. White privilege is playing the game of life on the easy setting. Scott Adams is what happens when someone has things handed to them their entire lives because of racial privilege, and then he convinces himself that he actually got it because he's really smart. So as his undeserved racial privilege continues to make him money, he becomes more convinced that he's some sort of genius and everyone is beneath him, especially black people. Well, for his sake, he better hope that he saved up some of all that money he supposedly made. The racists that he likes to speak for will give him a pat on the back for destroying his career, but they're not going to prop him up at this point. That's probably why he was saying that he knows that he basically has wrecked his income, and he knows it. Well, the lesson here is to never go full right-wing nut. You can go half right-wing nut like Clint Eastwood and still have a career. But when you go full right-wing nut, there's no coming back from that one. Scott Adams' faceplant is about the funniest thing he's done in 20-plus years. For the first time in a long time, he's finally made people laugh at him, though he doesn't seem to want to accept that he's the butt of the joke. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Mark Singleton, Wesley Monroe, Jacques Hargett, Ron Howard, and Sean. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.